Therefore, the Russian expectation people, therefore, by arguing that people as of today, they behave according to the principles of rationality in terms of perfectly competitive world, they basically postulate that there is no difference between the long period and the short period. They conflate the long period into the short. So they say to Modigliani and in fact there's a debate with Modigliani, because Modigliani became the president of the American Economic Association in 1977, and he gave the presidential address, and which has been published in the American Economic Review. It's in my reading, so which I will also put on the blackboard, on Moodle. And Modigliani argues that in that address that in the long run we agree that competitive conditions prevail, but we have the short-run problem. They say, no, that's not true. In the short run we don't have problem because people's behavior is consistent with the view that the world is perfectly competitive. So for now, this means, okay, that they view the supply curve essentially is vertical. Okay, that's what it means. It means that any government policy aiming at influencing the supply curve, in other words, generating additional demand, and through the creation of additional demand, you expand output and employment, that view is wrong, and the creation of additional demand by means of government expenditure can only create inflation. So they even have a stronger view of the neutrality of money, is what Lucas called super money neutrality, okay, super neutrality of money. Money is absolutely neutral. It impacts only on to the price level. That's all. Okay? So that is Dash expectation. So that Dash expectation is what. This is another interesting thing. Is what conquered. That was the way in which Keynesian economics of MIT type was destroyed. They destroyed it. But of course, Russian expectation is bunk. It's all a series of nonsense. There is nothing serious about Russian expectation. So, I started. Did you get a message from me yesterday by any chance? Yeah?
No.
An email? No?
No.
About this? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you did get that, right?
Somebody did and some. No, I don't. No,
I received it.
No, you did not receive? No, not on your personal, on the email, on your...
On Moodle?
In the general mailing list,
You send us message on Moodle.
Message on Moodle.
Oh, yes, we probably get it, but didn't check.
No, I was not in Moodle. When you send an email, a message to...
It appears when you open.
It doesn't.
I don't know, whenever I open Moodle, I have like a photo of you and a message. I don't know if it was that way.
So I sent everyone a message.
Yes, and it appeared in the message.
And then I lost it. I didn't see it. So I could not check if everyone got it. That's basically it. I sent you a reference to the book that I referred to yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah? And then I added another book. You know, the book, The American Guy, The American Historian. Did you get that?
Yes.
If you got that, then everybody.
What's the book, sorry?
It's called, I don't know. No, it's by the, it's a long, it's
Freedom from Fear.
Freedom from Fear.
Yeah,
American people in War and
prison.
Peace, something like that. Freedom.
No.
I don't see you now.
Is it under readings or printed paper?
I'm now on the Moodle.
No, it's not it's on the message that you get.
Yes,
The link
it
is-
arrived to the personal email. We are Moodle, but it arrived to the personal email.
Yes, but not for everybody.
Yeah, not for everybody.
For some people, they not.
Okay, so that I'll resend it to you, but I don't have it. I don't have it anymore. It doesn't.
Some people already get it, they can't get it out.
Can you send it back to me so I'll send it to everyone?
I mean, some people that already received it, they can share it to us.
Hmm? Yeah, no, but send it back to me. I will send it. Okay, do you know my address?
We have it here in email. We have address from USID and it's Bulgaria, some Australian education center.
Yeah, but I think it's
Joseph.
It's address that
Joseph.Halevi, right?
Joseph.Halevi.
Sydney, it should be Sydney. Or the US.
USYD.
You should, it should be Sydney. SYDNEY. Yeah? But now it should be this. Okay, so send it me to this otherwise. And I send it to you, okay? That's my Sydney. Sydney is always two Y's, two Y's. People make a mistake. It's Y and Y, there are no I in Sydney. EDU, AU. Okay? Send it back to me and bounce back to everybody. But then also I put another paper, I start putting according to the lectures, I start putting papers on the reading, in the reading. I put a new paper in the reading.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'll be putting additional papers today. So, the interesting thing in the rational expectation theory is that they claim, okay, that general equilibrium is the true theory of the actual behavior of the economy. But the people who reacted most critically to the rational expectation approach are actually the people of general equilibrium. It's the general equilibrium people who actually said, look, you are wrong. It is not true that general equilibrium is the present, is the best expression of competitive behavior. It's not true. And the way in which they argued, they were essentially two. One is well, this is nothing is happening. Is that this? No?
Did you try the glass window?
What do I have to try?
Maybe the glass window there.
Think about technology. Now, yes.
And close it.
Yeah, can we close it and open once?
Yeah. I just closed this. But anyway, the people, the two people who are most, this we don't need. No, I don't want to say that. Okay, good. So the two people, well, one was a professor from Cambridge, Frank Hahn. We should, you know, you would have, he treated people so badly that they never gave him the Nobel Prize. But he should have. Yeah, he was treating everybody badly. H-A-H-N. Frank Hahn from Cambridge. And another called Alan Kiernan. At Marseille University. So this university. There are many others, there are several others that criticize, but these are the two major criticisms. Okay. What Frank Hahn pointed out is that the claim that general equilibrium represents the actual behavior of an economy, of a competitive economy, is wrong, because general equilibrium results are extremely special cases. Actually, the results that are obtained through general equilibrium, that is to say, the existence of a price system that completely clears markets, that result depends on extremely special conditions. Extremely special conditions. And essentially these special conditions take us back. Remember I mentioned that there was a Russian Soviet mathematician that Slutsky that developed, that showed that you have two types of price effect. You have the income effect and the substitution effect. Okay? And actually, I made a mistake when I told you that. I said that it was in the 1920s. It was not. It was in 1915 because I checked. And in 1915, he actually published it in Italian. He actually published it in Giornale degli Economisti in 1915. And he showed that you must have two, in your classical consumer behavior, you have two conditions. You have the conditions of income effect, of substitution effect and income. Substitution effect is straightforward, right?
Yes.
It's clear. Substitution means that if apples are cheaper, become cheaper than pears, you will shift to more consumption of apples. You follow? That's substitution effect. You substitute. Income effect is more indirect, that is to say, you have to ask what happens now to the people who are selling apples. Because the price of apples have gone down, so their incomes may have gone down, right? And their incomes are sold. We are in general equilibrium system, so their incomes are spent, they're all spent. But because their incomes have gone down, the demand that they generate also has gone down, and prices may still keep going down. Do you follow me? So that the substitution effect does not reach a new equilibrium. Okay, and so and what Slutsky pointed out of these two effects, and already him pointed out that the substitution effect should be stronger. Should be stronger. And that was taken for granted. That's it. That was taken then later in the development of microeconomic modeling, mathematical modeling, that was taken for granted. Of course, the substitution effect is stronger, right? They refer to the income effect mostly as belonging to inferior goods or giffen goods, as they say, strong giffen goods, inferior goods. And that was it. In 1970, for totally different reasons, a bunch of people they did not work together. It happened that they worked in sequence. Okay, a guy called Rolf Mantel. He was Argentinian, but had a position. He was professor at Berkeley University. Another guy called Hugo Sonnenschein. He was at, I think, Chicago. And then the great general equilibrium theorist Gerard Debreu they developed three theorems in sequence. The first one, I think, was Debreu, then Mantel, and then Sonnenschein. And they developed three theorems. Their objective was to find the stability of a general equilibrium system. Stability of general equilibrium means, what does stability mean? You can have a solution with general equilibrium. Right? So you find the price, which clears all markets, everything is in equilibrium. Yes, but then you have to ask yourself, is that price stable? Let's say if I give it a little kick to the system, move it out of equilibrium, right? What will happen? If I move the system, this is equilibrium. If I kick the system out of equilibrium, okay, will it come back to equilibrium or will it escape from equilibrium? You see? Because if you have an analytical, mathematical results that give you the solution, but at the same time that solution is not stable, that just a little thing moves it out. That's in physics, in astrophysics. This is normally used, this kind of approach. If you study a trajectory, you have to study also the parameters of stability, right? Because otherwise the thing goes completely out of the equilibrium path. Therefore, they are applying the same principle. If you have a mathematical solution that gives you general economic equilibrium, but this equilibrium is not stable, there is not much you can do. You follow? It's not stable. You need just a little kick out of equilibrium will send the whole thing completely out of space, right? Then it means that this. What can you infer? Yes, okay, there is equilibrium, but look, it's not important, right? Because anything can move it out of equilibrium. You cannot expect the system to be always in equilibrium, like in money. You cannot be just in equilibrium all the time. So there will be some shocks here and there. So in order to make your theory, as they say, robust, strong, you have to show that okay, there are going to be shocks, but the system will come back to equilibrium. Okay, you push it out, but then push it out, it comes back. But so this is called stability, the stability issue. Mathematical economics is full of stability type of problems, full. Okay? And what all these people show is that the stability is unlikely to be obtained. That is, the likelihood of obtaining stability is very minimal. Namely, why? Because it is not true that the income effect is secondary to the substitution effect. Do you understand me? That it is not true that the income effect is secondary to the substitution effect. And this is clear if I give you a labor market example. On the basis of the principle that substitution is more important than income effect, you can say, okay, if there is more labor available, okay, wages fall. Because wages are now lower, firms will employ more workers, so they will become more labor intensive, right? They will employ more workers. But this is without calculating the fact that wages are also incomes and are also generate demand. So if wages fall, okay, then there's going to be less demand. It's obvious because wages are things which are being spent as money that is spent on goods. If there is less demand, you have two possibilities. Less demand means lower prices, yeah? Because the workers will, people who earn wages, the wages have fallen, therefore people who earn wages will demand less shoes, less socks, so prices will fall, okay? And this is what Kaletsky pointed out, that if monetary demand stays the same, yes, output, but if monetary demand does not stay the same, and if wages fall, monetary demand does not stay the same, prices will fall, and you have not increased, nothing changes relatively to, so you did not achieve the new equilibrium, or, which would be the case in Kaletsky's situation, if wages fall, there will be less real effective demand, and you create additional unemployment. So the substitution effect would tell you that by reducing wages, if there is more labor available, you should obtain more employment because you substitute, firms will substitute toward more labor-intensive techniques of production. But the income effect tells you that the results may be very different. The result may be actually the opposite. Okay, that's what the income effect. So it's not true that the income effect prevails over the substitution effect. This is what these people, Mantel, Sonnenschein, found. Okay, so the answer by rational expectation. So this destroys rational expectation story because it destroys the view that the world is a perfect general, perfect, competitive, stable general equilibrium. So the answer of the general equilibrium of the rational expectation people to this kind of challenge, the answer was that, look, we are ignorant, we don't know anything. No, that's true. They said we look only at econometric relations. Because in Chicago, they don't study general equilibrium. It is like a sort of mantra. There is mantra, general equilibrium, mantra. But there is no, they don't study. You go into the curriculum of Chicago University, there is no studying of general equilibrium. They talk about general equilibrium, but they don't study it. Okay? They don't study the analytical implications of the analytical construction. The second, so the first thing, look, we are a bunch of ignorances, and therefore we only believe in econometrics. So that they say, no, but econometrics relations, they show that there is general equilibrium. It's not scary. Of course, econometric relations cannot show this. So, and the other answer said, okay, listen, we have a solution to it. And the solution is that instead of general equilibrium, instead of having a general equilibrium based on many agents, right? General equilibrium takes many agents. General equilibrium, many products, many agents, many firms, many. Instead of having a general equilibrium based on many agents, we are going to show you that you can do this. I hope this is going to work again. This is not working. Okay, so I'll close it. Okay, but doesn't matter. We have to do this. So, true general equilibrium is based on many agents, okay? This is an agent. This is another agent. Okay? Another agent. So you have many agents in this. Okay? So then they say, we are going to aggregate, to bring together all these agents, okay? We bring them together okay, into one, okay, big agent. Okay? And one big agent. So, this is the representative agent. They call it representative agent. Okay? That's the representative agent. But this representative agent, okay, represents all the agents together, and the representative agent behave like a general equilibrium agent. So this is how they solve the issue, okay? They solve this issue, so this agent is so stupid because this agent is simultaneously an employer and a worker, so he also fires himself, okay? He also, this agent does everything. So this is the representative. They say, look, this agent behaves according to general equilibrium. He has a perfect rational expectations. He knows exactly how the future will look like, which he knows that the future is general equilibrium. He behaves as of today. Therefore, in this way, they say the principle of super neutrality of mind. That's it. So then came in 1992 and 94, came Alan Kerman. Alan Kerman is a very fine person. He wrote with a guy from Bonn University, Hildebrand. He wrote a very, very good book, mathematical book on general equilibrium. He was a professor. He started at York University. Then York is called. So he moved to Marseille. La France. He's he's one of the finest mathematical economists around. He's still writing. He also came, I was told yesterday, that he came last year, last year, but not many months ago, to Turin, to the other institute, Carlo Alberto Institute. He gave a couple of 12-hour course. Okay, so what Alan Kerman did in the mid-90s, in a number of papers from late 80s to the mid-90s, he took this view totally apart. And he did it in a very, very intelligent and simple and smart manner. What he did here is, he said, okay, you are telling me that there is a representative agent with all the behavioral features of a general equilibrium rational person. Okay. And you say that this agent represents all the agents together. But in order to represent all the agents together, this agent must have features, characteristics of also other agents. Do you follow me? Mm. So he builds an agent which is true representative agent. So I'll tell you the end of it. I'm not going to. The formal aspect is very simple, by the way, so it's not really very. But I'll tell you the essence of it. The essence is this: he builds an agent which represents all the agents, which represents more than herself, himself. So it has features which are different. Okay, so the same agent has different features, but it's the same agent which fully represents some other agents. Well, then he shows that on this basis, the representative agent cannot represent anyone, right? Because that representative agent becomes schizophrenic behavior. Yeah? Because that agent has been truly representative, must simultaneously behave differently. And therefore, this is actually inconsistent with the equilibrium notion the equilibrium objective, the equilibrium objective of the theory. I have a representative agent, and I show that this agent represents everybody, and therefore the behavior, the equilibrium behavior of the agent will lead to equilibrium results. But Alan Kerman shows that this is not possible, and therefore a true representative agent, which has features and characteristics of other agents, also cannot become schizophrenic and therefore operates in a contradictory manner, not consistent with equilibrium. This is the important point. So the built-in behavior of this kind of agent is a non-equilibrium behavior. It's a behavior which is not equilibrium. Well, essentially, that is the end of rational expectation. Finished. I mean, they cannot say anything. Okay? But the impact of rational expectation on policy, on ideology, on the concept of markets, etc., the impact has been very. So in fact, even if they have been analytically and theoretically completely wiped, completely defeated, they have, however, contributed to create a framework whereby the notion that you have to have, say, the notion that you have to have, say, Keynesian policies against unemployment and so forth. This notion is, they have created successfully the framework for denying that you have to have that kind of policies. You follow me? You understand what I mean? So theoretically, they're banned, finished. This guy doesn't exist. Okay? So there is no rational expectations equilibrium. There is no such thing. But their impact has been so big that they successfully eliminated the view that you address issues of unemployment, of this kind of issues. They have eliminated the view that you can address these issues by means of Keynesian policies, that is, budget, deficit, and so forth. Yeah? Of Keynesian type of policy. They have successfully eliminated it. Because there is, except in the case of the United States with Obama, essentially we tried to navigate some kind of Keynesian policy with Bernanke, with quantitative easing, but also federal spending. There's been a lot of federal spending in the United States, federal, not state. Federal spending in the United States, but with extreme difficulties, always sort of torpedoed by Congress and so forth. But and not to speak of in Europe, it has become impossible to argue cases for Keynesian policies. It has become essentially impossible. Okay? You may say a bit here, a bit there. Just occasionally you can say something in that respect, but in reality, it is impossible. And that is the lasting result of general expectation. Because general expectations which rose up in the United States, essentially, monetarism, this is the new form of monetarism. When it became the ideology, it became essentially the ideology that markets are rational, that we don't have to do anything about them and so forth. That was taken by President Reagan. President Reagan loved that. And all these people became actually advisors, etc. I mean, they were quite liked by the American administration. But the truth is that President Reagan did not apply rational expectation policies. He did not, okay? President Reagan ran one of the largest budget deficits in US history, peacetime history, okay? One of the largest budget deficits. So President Reagan, he took the ideology and then ran with it. That markets are fantastic. He told about the miracle of the market, and then he started to fork out money left, right, and center, mostly for military, industrial, military purposes, essentially for military. But that had a big impact on the United States. Actually, American economy was in a sort of recession, serious 10% unemployment between 1980 and 1982, and by starting a very big budget deficit policy, mostly on military with the Star Wars program and all that sort of stuff, he managed to get the economy out of the recession. So he did not apply Russian expectation, quite the opposite. He did not apply Russian expectation. He used the ideology, not the content, not the analytical content. But just the same, the impact of Russian expectation is that of killing all possibility so far of a rational discussion concerning unemployment. So that unemployment, for instance, is about everywhere viewed, except in the United States during Obama. It's about everywhere viewed as an issue related to supply conditions, to labor market. They talk all the time about labor market reforms, labor market reforms. What is a labor market reform? The labor market reform means lower wages. That's what it means, you know. Before the labor markets are not clearing, not flexible enough, etc. They have to become more flexible. Therefore, labor market reforms are basically a code, a buzzword for reducing wages. It's all in those terms, whether it's in Europe or in Europe. Actually, it had a very big impact because it consolidated a view that budget, also in connection to the stupid Maastricht Treaty and all the other Euro stupid agreements. It created the framework whereby the budget deficit is a bad thing, but also in countries which are not part of the Eurozone system, like Britain, also they have this view that the budget deficit is a bad thing. And if you look at the recent experience, as a matter of fact, the British recovery, the British economic recovery is linked to actually expenditure, government expenditure. It's government expenditure that allowed the British economic recovery. It's the only thing that then periodically now the Conservatives want to cut it back, want to cut back on government expenditure. But for a while they talked about government cutting the government budget, but then they relented on it. They did not pursue that strongly, and now they want to implement it strongly, and then we get the economy back into some kind of recession if they don't stop, if they want to really implement it. Basically, that's so Russian expectation is a failure theoretically, but it has been successful politically. This is very, very, very successful politically. And especially if you put it in the framework of European context today, well, that had a very big impact for reasons which are not connected to the Russian expectation. It became a good instrument to argue against budget deficit and stuff like that, which is totally crazy. So, well, that's basically the long and the short of it. Yeah, that's the end. Now, I want to tell you a couple of things about what I'm going to proceed on the. First of all, you have my lecture notes. My lecture notes, you can read them in sequence. They are on Moodle. You read them in sequence, and essentially you get all this course in more detailed manner. Okay, so my lecture. Second, I also have put on, but I will now rearrange it with Antonio. I also have all the necessary material for you to write the essay. And you will, between say today, tomorrow, and then Monday, because I'm staying here till Tuesday, you will have the material selected in such a way that there will be some subfolders in which I put material which is good for classical, for understanding classical economics, material which is good for understanding marginalist Marshalian economics, and then I put the material which is good for understanding all what happened after 1945 and so forth. So I put this in this folder so that you can access it. And then you will also get, hopefully by Monday, but I have to do this during this weekend, you will get the essay. So with the essays, okay, you will know which of the subfolders to use, which of the, so the whole reference system, you don't have to go and disappear into the net, into the website. You don't have to sink into, because I notice this happens to me often in Sydney. So I give a subject, you know, and in Sydney I also put all that material in a book, in a kind of book which is here. But the book that I put here, every year I add or change a bit, so that book is a bit old. There is in the book is lacking some of the material that I have. But then the students give me back their essay, and what is clear is that what happened, they got the topic, okay, then they essentially dive into the internet, okay, into Google or all the engines, etc. They do a desperate search, and they don't use the sources that I give them. You know, I said, look, I tell them, look, all the sources that you need. If you can expand, you can expand, but first use the sources because these sources are consistent with the topics, and use those sources. You know. They don't. They just go. They disappear into the net. They get. Basically, they sink into it. They find strange things. They find strange things. They quote to me things which are completely out of the blue, and of course they don't get good marks. You know, it's a result of that. And I don't completely fail them, but they don't get good marks. And look, everything that you need is in my reading kit, you know, and now the reading kit I have it electronically because we scan essentially everything, and therefore I suggest you too, you use first what is available. You look at what is available right away, and then you, if you need, you can go and search into other things, okay? You can go into outer space and search things, but use stuff that we have in the reading kit. Okay. Do you have any? You still have a bit of time. So, do you have any questions?
Sorry, it's a question of what you say now. That why did you say that this the budget deficit is seen like, I mean, a bad thing nowadays here, and it's not, in fact.
So, can you repeat?
Yes, this thing that you mentioned about the budget deficit.
Yeah.
That it seemed like, I mean, a bad thing nowadays, and.
It's a bad thing, the budget deficit nowadays. Yeah.
Okay. I thought that you said that it was. I don't know, perhaps it was like a necessary...
No, it's a bad thing in the mind of politicians, etc. I think the budget deficit is not a bad thing.
Okay, that's why I wanted to know why...
I don't think that the budget deficit is a bad thing.
But why?
First of all, it depends why. because Keynes was right in that the budget deficit can be a bad thing only if you are at full employment or full capacity. Then, if you issue further deficit, if the government keeps spending, well, you will generate money which, at this point, you have inflation, which is not useful. There is no use for that money because the economy is already at full. But if the economy is not at full employment, but it's not, and it's not even near full employment, you know, the economy is here and full employment is here, well, that's what you have to do, is to use the budget deficit. You know, just spend money into all sorts of projects, programs that you come up with, that's all. So it's not a bad thing. The budget deficit is not a bad thing. But the budget deficit becomes a bad thing if you think, number one, that the economy is naturally tending to an equilibrium, and you come, and if you go totally crazy, you can also go completely crazy. I mean, I can go completely crazy. I don't want to make you go completely crazy. And you develop a view whereby the stability of a particular system, very heterogeneous system called the European Union and called the Eurozone in particular, the stability depends upon parameters that establish arbitrary limits to debt and deficit. Yeah, that's the case, that's the European case. Those parameters were not the result of some crazy economist that say, oh, I have a theorem here, a model that tells you that you should have no more debt than 60% of GDP, that's the part, and 3% of the deficit. This came up from an agreement between France and Germany, with France forcing it on Germany, and to establish a single currency. And see, Germany did not want a single currency. Germany did not want the euro. Okay, there is German Helmut Kohl. Bundesbank did not want the euro. Okay, they did not want the euro. But Mitterrand said, listen, you know what you did? What did you do? And they said, what did you do? Yeah? You completely upset my policy. And they said, how? And they said, well, I was in a situation that was from de Gaulle, by the way, from de Gaulle. That's why you to understand economics, real economics, you understand point. From de Gaulle. De Gaulle took France out of a big crisis. It was a big colonial crisis with Algeria, number one. Vietnam, number two, Algeria. Not big, that was a big problem for France, okay? How did he take it away? He said, independence to Algeria. Give independence to Algeria, we concentrate ourselves on Europe. This means we concentrate on the relationship with Germany, which was already after 1945, a relationship with Germany. But Germany is strong. Germany became stronger right away. It was never weak anyway. Germany was never, since Bismarck, Germany never weak. Okay? It doesn't matter how much you bomb, it doesn't matter. It does not matter because German industry, the German model of industry is what is the strength of Germany. Okay? Even during the Weimar Republic, that it went a bit wobbly because of the inflation, because of the, even then, even during the Weimar Republic, German industrial strength was very, very big. So they said, okay, how do we establish this relation with Germany? I don't want America to interfere. I established a relation with Germany with two things. First, I have nuclear bombs. Yeah, that's why he set it up, the so-called force de frappe, nuclear bomb. Secondly, I established a relation with the Soviet Union. So Germany is in the middle, okay? And then I deal on everything. That was the framework. That was always the French framework. It did not always work the way in which the French elite wanted to work, but that was the framework. When a guy whom I think is a complete bandit, okay? In fact, there are two complete bandits. One is Mikhail Gorbachev, and the other is Edward Shevardnadze, okay? They are complete bandits. When they decided to destroy the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union did not collapse as a result of some big social crisis, or did not collapse because of big economic crisis. So there was the Afghanistan problem, that's true, but actually that's one of the things Gorbachev solved by the end of the 80s, you know? But it did not collapse because of that. It collapsed because of internal decisions of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which led to the breakup between the party and the army. That was the thing that really brought down the Soviet Union. Because the Chinese always were watching. They were watching, so we must not follow kind of, we have to reform. So, for instance, the Chinese actually said, we like perestroika, we don't like glasnost, you know, which means transparency. We like perestroika, yes, reforms, etc., some capitalism. Glasnost, what is underneath glass? Anyway, so what they did is they unilaterally decided, in agreement with Germany, with Kohl, and of course the United States, because you cannot come to an agreement, Gorbachev and Helmut Kohl, without the United States, obviously, and the United States, they decided to pull out of Germany. They decided to pull out, okay? And they decided, of East Germany, and they also decided to undermine East Germany. This is a very important part. They undermine the East Germany. The Soviet Union, the Gorbachev, they made East Germany weaker on purpose, okay? So West Germany, Kohl, etc., absorbed East Germany. And that was, for France, that was complete, you know, that was France, that meant that the whole policy, the whole position of France in Europe was based on this thing. I have a relation with Germany, a strong, close relation with Germany, but because Germany is so strong, therefore the geostrategic position of France was supposed to be supported by a special relation between France and the Soviet Union. That was the whole story. And in fact, when Kohl decided to move toward the referendum for the unification of East Germany with West Germany, France and Britain and Italy also, they were not favorable. They would have preferred to have an independent, for a while at least, independent transition period with independent East Germany, okay? GDR. But this did not happen. And that upset the strategic position of France in Europe. This is number two, is that is that Bundesbank, when East Germany was absorbed, okay, and then there was this big clash between Kohl and Bundesbank because of the question of the Ostmark relatively to the Deutschmark, okay? The Ostmark was, during the German Democratic Republic, was 4 Ostmark with 1 Deutschmark, okay? That was the exchange rate, the official exchange rate. In reality, in the black market was even more, 6, 7, 8 Ostmarks relatively to 1 West German, the Deutschmark. Kohl, Bundesbank did not want one-to-one exchange. Right? Bundesbank was not in favor of changing all the Ostmark into Deutschmark, but on the one-to-one. So 1 Ostmark equal to 1 Deutschmark. They did not want the Bundesbank because that's inflation. They had a monetarist view. This is inflation. So, but Kohl imposed upon the Bundesbank to accept one-to-one exchange. That was not a wrong thing, by the way. It destroyed the East German economy in the process, right? In the process, it destroyed the East German economy. But it was not wrong in the sense that you can understand why he was in favor, not only for electoral purposes, because then you want elections, but again, not only for electoral purposes, but also because, say that you keep the difference, then you can, and you have one country with 2 currencies, and you exchange, and what you would happen is that the people from East Germany would immediately, very quickly move to the West. You know, so you start having immediately millions of moving in. So the only way to do it was perhaps an alternative to exchange on a one-to-one basis. Okay. By the way, not everything got exchanged on a one-to-one basis, but that was the reference on a one-to-one basis. So the pensions were not exchanged on a one. There's certain things that were not exchanged on a strict one-to-one basis, but that was it. Once he did that, so the Bundesbank accepted this. It had to accept it because that was imposed on them by the. So it's not so independent as people think. But as soon as he did that, the Bundesbank increased the interest rates. You see, in order to fight possible inflation. So interest rates in Germany went up. As they went up, all the interest rates in Europe were linked together because Europe had then a system which was called the European Monetary System, EMS. And the European Monetary System was based on, and even Britain was based on a bunch of currencies, Deutschmark, French franc, Dutch guilder, Belgian franc, Italian lira. Later, the last to come was the British pound, was then the Denmark thing, and the krone. And so they were all in this Europe, the Spanish peseta, the Portuguese escudo, not the Greeks, they were not in. They were the European, it was called the European Monetary System, which was set up by Helmut Schmidt and Giscard d'Estaing in 1979. When the Bundesbank pushed the interest rate up, well, either all countries would follow the increase in the interest rate, or the system would come apart. And France increased the interest rate, and that was very costly for France. Other countries couldn't. So Britain collapsed, out. Spain, out. Portugal, out. Italy, out. Okay? And the European monetary system, boom, completely collapsed, leaving France alone with Germany. For Germany, Bundesbank didn't think it was a problem, because they have big faith in German industry, in the capacity of German industry to, and eventually to take a big time, but then you produce. The other countries don't have the same type, and therefore France was left alone to face this, to sustain, actually, to keep interest rate high, and not to have, they don't have the same faith in the industry as the Germans have. The Germans are right in having faith in their industry, yeah? And the French are also right on not having so much faith in their industry. So, I mean, and at this point, Mitterrand says, hey, you there, Helmut, come here. You know what? Now that you have East Germany, now that basically you screwed me up, okay, all my position with your friend Gorbachev and so forth, you screwed the position of France in Europe up, and here we are left hanging on high interest rates to keep the parity between the French franc and the Deutsche Mark. And you want the parity because, you know, number one export market for Germany, number one is France, number one, okay? So, then you must give me part of your money. And Helmut Kohl says, what? Yeah. You bring the Deutsche Mark into Europe. We make a single currency, okay? A single currency. That's what it means. It means that Germany will have to share part of the burden. That was the Mitterrand view, okay? And he pushed for the single currency. That's him. And the Germans said, okay, then it was a game, because there was the Bundesbank. It lasted for 5-6 years, this story. And then the Bundesbank said, no, we are not leaving the Deutsche Mark is ours, we don't leave the Deutsche Mark, don't touch the Deutsche Mark. and so France started to corrupt that's famous, the Elf story. You know about the Elf story? Elf is the big oil company of France. That's a big story. They all keep, the French, you know, they keep the scandals. They manage to, they put state secret on this, like Soviet Union. It's all Putin. State secret, that's it, finish. Don't talk. But it's a big story then. Elf is the big oil company of France. So what they started to do, they started to finance, they started to send a lot of money to the German Christian Democrats, to Helmut Kohl, to help them win the elections. Okay? So the German Christian Democrats became dependent on Elf, on France for money, the party. Yeah, they were sending money to the, so they started to corrupt the thing, and they put, eventually, there is the Yugoslavia story, which I'm not going to talk about because it's part of the business here. But eventually, Kohl came to the party. In other words, accepted the formation of a single currency in Europe. Okay? But that was the agreement with the Bundesbank. Because the Bundesbank said, no, our marks, no one touches it. Okay? Then so the agreement was, okay, we go for a single currency only if it is as close as possible, basically identical to the Deutsche. Only if the policy behind the single currency is exactly the policy that Germany would have had, the Bundesbank would have had relatively to the Deutsche. You follow? Mm-hmm. That's exactly, that has to be the same. So then we agree. The French said, okay, we agree, but we want the Deutsche Mark anyway. You know, it's stronger than better than the franc, the French franc. You said, yeah, that's fine. But what did it mean? It meant that the budgetary policy of every single country would remain within the single country, that only together they would only have monetary policy. Fiscal policy would belong to each single country. But at the same time, it did not mean, however, that they were free in doing any type of fiscal policy. The fiscal policy had to be consistent with the monetary policy of the Bundesbank, in other words. Okay. So they said, how do we establish the criterion? How do we establish the criterion for the monetary, for the fiscal policies in countries so different like Italy and, say, France and Germany and Spain and all these sort of different countries? How do we establish the criterion for the monetary policy, for the fiscal policy to be consistent with a unified single currency? They looked, okay, how much deficit there is in France, how much deficit there is in Germany, how much the debt, percentage of debt over national income is in France, how much the percentage of debt over national income there is in Germany. Well, it happened that in the very early 90s, in relation to the Maastricht Treaty, it was 92, 93, the percentage was almost the same between Germany and France. Exactly, more or less the same. Okay, same that, 58% debt over GDP in Germany, around 60% in France, 3% deficit. They had it more or less the same, so 2% in Germany, less was in France. They had more or less the same. So, okay, these are the criteria. The criteria were based on the fact that Germany and France had the same sort of percentage, and they defined this case. So every other country has to converge to those criteria. Now, you see, but if you take Italy, forget Greece came in, it's Greece. It's not relevant, Greece, you know, it's feta cheese, it's good feta cheese, but it's feta cheese, you know, there's a feta cheese. And so, if you take Italy, what people do, Italy, you know that Italy is the most austere country. It's difficult to visualize it, but Italy has the most austere budget in Europe. But not now, for the last 20 odd years. For the last 25 years, the most austere budget, the most Prussian budget. Now, imagine Italy being Prussian. Well, it's impossible. Yeah, the most Prussian budget in Europe, the most austere Protestant budget in Europe is Italy. How? Because if you look, you take OECD data, and there is the difference, there is always what's called primary deficit, okay? Primary deficit and the total budget deficit. What is the difference between the primary deficit and the total budget deficit? The primary deficit is the deficit without interest payment, okay? When the government issues a bond to finance its deficit, it has to pay an interest to the bank, to the person, to the family that holds the bond, right? So, this interest, when it is paid, is calculated as additional government deficit, when you pay by the end of the year. So, additional government expenditure. So, it is added to the deficit. But this is only interest. This is interest payment. It's not deficit because you are spending too much. It's a deficit that comes as a result of the fact that you are paying the interest on the previous debt, and you therefore incur into a deficit. Now, if you take away the interest payment, if you look at the Italian budget, Italy has a surplus. Italy is in a surplus since 1991. Italy has a budget surplus, does not have a budget deficit. All the deficits comes from interest rate. That is to say, it comes from the accumulated debt in the 80s, okay? And the interest rates that were charged on the debt. That's what it is. So it's like usually right? People become poor, families become poor often, not because they spend too much, but because under particular conditions they had to incur the debt. This happens a lot in Naples, okay? And they go to the mafia, to the Camorra, and they get money because the banks doesn't give the money. The Camorra actually is very good, is a very good financial institution. It's a very good mafia is a good financial institution. There is, it's very important to say, there is banks in Italy don't lend money to normal people, okay? There is no such thing. And if you go, there is a writer that has become known, too much known, and there is no good now. But when he started, he was very good. And that's Saviano, Roberto Saviano. He wrote a book on the Camorra. And what he points out in one of the first chapters is that in the areas where there is a lot of kind of black type, black market, not black market, but informal economy, not officialized economy, where they produce a lot of textiles, a lot of stuff. The money, the Camorra lends money to the people who work from home, who actually are making the dresses and stuff like that from home. The Camorra lends money on terms which are much better than the banking terms, okay? But then, what happens, what they do, they lend you money in easy terms, but then if you have difficulties in paying, they start squeezing you, okay? And many people, they actually they have to become Camorra people themselves. They have to give services to the Camorra and stuff like that. Because they are saddled, if the Camorra decide, okay, I take away the business from you, and they take it away and they give it, then the person will have to keep paying, okay, the debt, and not because it's spending too much, but because it's being squeezed out. And this is what happened in Italy. It is the accumulated debt in the 80s which has created a usury type of situation. And the way in which it has this accumulated debt, the financial policies by the government of the 80s, in the 80s, which was a kind of government which was based on really generating an enormous amount of international debt for Italy. But this is also connected to the fact that inflation rates were very high, and therefore the debt, the interest rate in the financial market was high. So whenever Italy issued a bond in the 80s, the rate of interest were very high, and this had a big impact on the budget and on the debt. But since Italy is the country which for nearly 25 years has had a budget surplus, so it was very austere, you see. Now, if you keep imposing this kind of restrictions, eventually, and not so eventually, if things, unless you have somebody generating a growth rate which makes it possible, sustainable. But if that growth rate is not there, eventually you come down. That's it. And this is what happened. Yeah, because the growth rate was basically made possible essentially by the United States and China. These are the two factors that made possible the growth. Yeah? The United States, number one, major export markets, etc. Europe, or more or less in a position to grow, not much, but in a position to grow. And then also China started importing a lot of stuff from European European countries, especially high technology stuff, mechanical industry and stuff like that. So these two factors were, and also many oil-producing countries importing stuff from essentially from Germany and Italy. These were the two countries. Russia was a major importer of consumer goods from Italy, and also major importers of both capital goods, especially oil industry and stuff like that, and as well as Mercedes and all these sort of things into Russia. So all this sustained. Then these conditions go for one reason or another, they vanish. Well, that collapses. The thing collapses. That's the crisis. And then we need budget deficit, but you cannot have budget deficit within the European economy. See, Britain did much better because it's not part of the European Monetary Union, and they had a very good central banker who was actually a student from Cambridge. That he got the first in Cambridge, called Mervyn King, Sir Mervyn King. Mervyn King was the Bank of England, and he, although in power there was the Conservative came with the idea of cutting the budget, although they did not cut the budget, they really talked a lot, but they didn't cut the budget. But Mervyn King pushed in the other direction right away. They pushed in the other, he started to have quantitative easing, etc., all that sort of stuff. And then the Conservatives talked a lot about cutting the budget. They did cut budgets for the poor people, essentially. But they did not cut the overall budget that much. And at the beginning they did, but then they relented. And so these two things together enabled a sort of British recovery. But this is because they don't have a constraint over the budget. There is no constraint in Britain over the budget, you see? There is no an external institutional constraint. Whereas here in Europe, there is an institutional constraint represented by the essentially it's the Maastricht Treaty translated into the European Central Bank, and so they will not come out. Not come out. Dead.
Could I just ask a question regarding the exam?
Yeah.
When we write, shall we cite where we got information from the past, like I don't know, lecture notes, week 1, or as an active?
No, if you refer to me, forget. But, if you refer, I suggest, yes, that's a correct question. In relation to the printed stuff, in relation to the articles and papers, yes, if you use it, then you do the standard bibliographical procedure that you quote and you put in a footnote, or at the end of the paper you put the references. Yeah. As far as my lecture notes, just use it, just like a pirate, you can use it. So that's okay.
The signature sheet.
Sorry?
The signature sheet.
Where is it? I don't know. What wasn't it circulating? It's here, isn't it? This is yesterday or today? What is it? Yesterday or today?
Yesterday, I think. This is yesterday. Professor, you mentioned that the primary efficiency didn't count the primary efficiency.
The primary, the primary budget does not count the interest rate.
Yes, and also there is another deficit called total deficit. So there's two kinds of efficiency.
No, there is the primary and there is the one which is due to the interest rate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Original.
Yeah.
Also, another question about Swiss funds. This really something not funny because you mentioned that Swiss funds just have no sterling towards euros, and the economics like Turin believe that it's security, it's like a KG.
It's like you, yeah.
But I don't understand why it's like KG.
What, in Europe?
I mean, the Swiss policy about the Swiss funds appreciation.
That it's not appreciation, it's that first they kept the Swiss franc
Yes.
close to in a fixed relation with the euro, right?
Yes.
And then they decided to give it up because it was becoming a bit too costly.
Why is it so costly?
But because the tendency for the Swiss franc was to go up.
Yes.
So, in order to defend the position of the French franc, they would have to, or the Swiss franc, they would have had to keep selling Swiss francs on the market, or alternative, they would have had to, which is the same thing, to create demand for euros to prevent the Swiss franc from going up. But that became too costly. So they decided, they decided so quantitative easing in Europe by Draghi,
Yes.
they thought that they would make it too difficult for them to defend the position of the Swiss franc.
Yes. Because it's not easy to follow because we have a tracking system.
Now it's gone up.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, right. So it was a pleasure. I'll be around till Monday included. So if you want to talk to me, you can. Okay. If you have questions, you can just send me an email and then or tell Antonio. But just send me an email and then I'll be around. Okay. Okay. Tomorrow. Okay.